There we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures. Tonight, episode 53. We've actually done the 1 year and fully looped around. So episode 53, we're going to get back to the basics a little bit, and we're going to talk about camping in the spring. And more specifically, how to get the best experience at a camping in the spring. Because this
Hello,
time of
everyone.
year,
Welcome to another
um,
episode of Atlantic Bushcraft Adventures.
I don't know if that's echoing through or not, but anyway, this time of year, it's a real
It's
mixed bag of weather, right? Like it's hot one day, it's cold the next day, it's raining one day, it's snowing the next day, it's windy. It's a real fun time of year, but it's a time of year where you really have to know how to get the most out of it. Would you not agree, Ben?
Oh, for sure. It's possibly some of the most challenging times, for sure. But yes, there's definitely a rewarding side of it. There are some advantages, but it is possible. I think I said this to you before. I think it's my least favorite time of year. Uh, Fall being really my favorite, probably followed by summer, winter being around a third, but spring just because of the additional challenges. Um, would be what I would put in there. So,
Uh, yeah, and I kind of agree. It's not really my most favorite time of year, but you can get some good out of it. There is hope.
oh yeah. Um, so here in Nova Scotia, it's almost spring now, like weather-wise. If you went out, the ice on the lakes and stuff is melting, breaking up. If you look at the forecast for the next 2 weeks, there's only a couple of days where during the daytime we're going to go below zero, at least in the area I'm to. And next week, if on a 14-day schedule right now, or forecast, even in the evenings, it's going to be pretty well above zero at night, or just hitting the negatives at night. So we get a lot of melt. Like most of our snow has taken a massive hit in the last few days. Uh, Ice on lakes would be treacherous if possible to get on. Um, but there's still some ground cover, so you're not really sure if you're walking over water or anything. So to me, those are some of the big challenges. You still have absolutely no flies at this time of year, and we won't really see a lot of flies till what, late May?
Uh, yeah, late May is when you're going to get flies, but you're going to start getting insects probably April. You'll have to start concerning yourself. I mean, ticks will start coming out of the woodwork around April, and then your bugs will just kind of progressively
Yeah.
increase in numbers and kind of severity of annoyance. If that makes any kind of sense.
And I find like June is probably the absolute worst for bugs.
Yeah, any month that's, well, I mean, it's Nova Scotia, it's coastal. Any month that's hot and humid,
Yeah.
it's a nightmare for bugs.
Yeah, I know we go to our cabin. June is horrible because I think it's still doesn't quite hot enough during the day to drive them off. And it's warm enough in the evenings that they really hang around. So it seems to be nonstop. But now June ends, July comes out. You get quite a bit of relief in the day. It's just come really out in the evening and the morning a bit. But that's a little off topic, I guess. Spring, the advantages: limited bugs. If you're into water, most of your rivers are probably at their highest, so your ability to explore is probably at its best for boats, canoes, kayaks, anything like that. But your water is basically just above freezing. So you do have to be awful careful if you get wet to sort of stay dry. And I think that's, in the end, when you think of all the springtime, that's the big thing: staying dry. The ground's wet. You get a lot more rain, snow melt and stuff. Like the water's high, so that's your main thing to me, is staying dry. How you do that varies from person to person, and we'll talk a little bit, I think, now on what we do. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're in the spring, you'll probably go to your hammock if you're out.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely you got to get off the ground time. As you said, it gets wet. A big problem this time of year is I don't want to say flash flooding, but literally flash flooding. If you're out and it's warm and you're nice and things are happening good and it's raining, which is awesome because it melts the snow, all of a sudden now you got that compounding water, right? You have the rain coming down plus the snow it's melting. It's real easy to get real wet conditions real fast. Now it may not be like 7 feet of water flowing down, but all of a sudden where you went to sleep dry, you could wake up in literally 4 inches of water easily.
Yeah,
So
and the general moisture in the ground, like anywhere you try to lay down, you need a really protective layer, sorry, to protect you. So some kind of ground tarp or a ground sheet. Your mat needs to be definitely something that's going to protect you from the water. No matter how good your tarp is above you, it's the ground below you that's really got a lot of risk there. So with the hammock, we kind of eliminate that because we've pulled ourselves off the ground. We'll use our underquilts that we have or our pads inside, whatever we're using, and you at least get that level of protection. This sort of downside is if you're not good at setting up your hammock, you do have a little less protection from the weather otherwise. I haven't really had much of a problem, but some of the hammock tarps are kind of minimalist.
and it's a very unforgiving time of year, so any mistakes you have, they get compounded. If to to explain that a little better, it's if you don't secure your tarp down properly and the wind picks up, it's worse in the spring than it would be in the fall because once again now you have all those outside elements that could potentially work in, and you have to worry about. So it was just a little bit of snow. All of a sudden it warms up a little in the morning, and now it's raining and it's blowing on your face. Like it's just a very unforgiving time of year. So you do have to keep that in mind. And as Ben said, if you're running with a hammock minimalist tarp, either be very sure about how you're securing that down and how you're going to use it, make sure it's covering everything you want to, or it might be you may be better off looking at something else. And that does add some complication for a lot of people out there because they buy one tarp, for instance, and it's one of those things where one item can do everything good, but it may not do it well. And it's that time of year when that really shows through because it's almost a specialty time of year to try and be comfortable in the woods. If, in my opinion, anyway, I'm sure people would disagree with me, but in my opinion, it's like the worst season out of our 4 seasons to try and get out in the woods and be comfortable because it's just gross. It's always a mixed bag of everything being thrown at you. All of the other months, you have like one extreme. Fall, it's cool. That's not bad. Winter, it's cold. You can deal with that. Summer, it's hot, maybe wet, but that's okay. In spring, it could be cold, it could be warm, it could be raining, it could be snowing, it could be hailing, it could be sleet, it could be freezing rain, it could be flooding. It's guaranteed it's going to be wet regardless of what it's doing. It's just how much wet is there going to be? And what form is it going to be in? Is it going to be wet on the ground and freezing on the top, or is it going to be wet on both sides? So,
yeah. And that's not to say there's not some of the most beautiful days in the spring. You get a nice warm spring day. It's almost a certain scent in the air. It smells great. It looks great. Things are coming to life. I mean, you watch your trees starting to bud out. Certain flowers are starting to come out. A lot of animals become more active. So it's a really interesting time of year to be out there, and it can be very enjoyable. But yeah, the weather is a greater factor for me in the spring than I think it is in the rest of the year. You said in the winter, I know I have to prepare for cold. So yes, I'm going to bring a bigger sleeping bag. I'm going to make sure I have a good ground cover for me. But if that bigger sleeping bag gets wet, it's now virtually useless for retaining any heat. And it probably weighs 3 to 4 times what it did before it was wet. So it's even harder to lug out of there. The spring, it's much more potential for it to get wet. Normally in my hammock, I use the diamond-shaped tarp. So if you think about that, it gets really narrow at the ends, it's really wide in the center, and it comes down. So if you get a good crosswind, or a wind that's coming at you head to foot, it can kind of get in underneath a little bit. It can get your feet or your head fairly wet. That's where maybe a bigger, full-size square tarp would make more sense, where you can bring the ends down. If you've got doors, I oftentimes close the ends up kind of like doors, and then regardless of which way the wind comes, I'm kind of protected from the weather. So it's all things to take in mind. Some people swear by, and I think I'm fairly confident I can do it with a diamond-shaped tarp. Just you got to get it down low, and you got to kind of pull it in a little bit, give you max protection. You don't want it as high. You definitely don't want to span it out wide, because now there's more area for the wind to get in underneath, and you really have to pick your orientation. So figure out where the prevailing winds are and set up to best accommodate for those. So it's more to think of. It's not just looking for two trees that are equal, a good distance apart, and nothing overhanging above. Now you're looking for two trees in a certain direction.
And not in a certain direction. It
So
can't
something
be in a
else
dip
to-
either, right? Because that's where water's going to pool now.
Yeah. Even if you are 6 inches above ground, if you're down in a hole, that 6 inches, even a couple of an inch of rain can equal to a foot of rain in the wrong location. Like you said, flash flooding. You're down in a low point, and you got all that water from the hills above you coming down. That could end up underwater. The other thing that I like to think about a bit is like the rivers. Like as the ice is breaking up. Have you been near a river when the ice broke up?
Not very big or high rivers. Like my home area, Barney's River, that was always interesting to watch break up. But I mean, at the deepest part, I don't think that river ever got deeper than 4 feet. In all honesty,
Yeah.
I mean, I've walked the whole thing from where I was in Barney's River all the way down to Merrimack Harbor, and it's never been over my head. So when it breaks up, it's neat. But I'm assuming on a bigger river, it's going to be a lot more spectacular.
Well, depending on the river. I mean, the river my cabin was growing up. I mean, I think again Newfoundland, but again, most of it you would be lucky to get your knees wet in the summer. There was a couple of swimming holes that were 6 feet deep and all that, but for the most part, it was knee deep and probably about 20, 30 feet across. Not a big river, and it went a few miles. But in the winter, as the ice builds up, when it breaks, it creates basically dams. And I've seen that little river, or some people call it a brook or stream, I've seen it pick up whole cabins and move them. My own cabin, when we were growing up, got moved right into the middle of the road. It picked it right up and pushed it off 30, 40 feet up, and laid it back down. Didn't really damage anything. And we weren't the only cabin that got picked on that time. So that's something to think about. Even a small river in the right conditions, if the ice breaks up, comes down, creates an ice jam, all that water is going to start backing up the stream until it creates enough pressure to push through the ice or it melts.
Well, prime example of that, now that I get thinking of it, is the waterfall you and I went camping at the first time. Where we were set up, this time of year is usually underwater.
Yeah.
And
I can see
that wasn't a deep river at all.
No, but where we were set up, you could see on the trees where debris and stuff had gathered up at the high water mark, which is significantly higher than, our hammocks would have been quite wet.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been underwater, but we basically would have been floating in water. There would have been, I'm trying to think how high that would be. That must be like 1.5 feet higher than what it normally is.
Oh, yeah.
So
1.5 to 2 feet, I would venture to guess. I'm just trying to picture the trees in that area. And it was like when you were in the dips, it was a good ways up, like not quite waist height, but mid-thigh anyways.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And that's a significant amount, something to keep in mind. So, yeah, in the spring, if you're parked near a river, and it might be gurgling along quite nicely and no real issues, you don't know what's going to happen overnight. You don't know how quick that, if a couple of pieces of ice break off and jam up downriver, that's all just going to back up until it either goes over or pushes through. So that can raise the river pretty quick, and it can make a lot of things happen really fast. It can push up other ice, it can break things up, it can move trees. So take that into consideration. Spring can be quite a interesting time around rivers, and I can remember being at the cabin and hearing the ice crack and break, and it's quite an interesting thing. And you never seem to see it all happen, but like one day it's a solid, the river's a solid ice, and the next day there's like 6 feet of ice piled up on either side of the river, and it's just going down like nothing had happened. Like what? I'm sure it was amazing feat when that all broke up and built,
Yeah, I know. I now that I can think of it, you're completely right. Like the river, even Marigamish River there, that's where I moved a little later in life. Just like you said, it's like one day it's frozen right over, and then the next day you go through, it's just wide open. And I mean, like there's ice chunks flowing down, but more or less it's open.
And a lot of it's piled up on the shore on either side, right? Like uh, that happened. You didn't necessarily see it happen, but you wouldn't want to be there when it happened. Maybe awake and able to stand back, but if you were asleep and that happened,
I have a feeling like you wouldn't have time to react. I feel like even if you heard it, by the time you were shook out enough and coherent enough to do something, it's already too late. You know what I mean? I wouldn't want to take the chance of it. So I guess the takeaway from this is in the spring, be very leery of rivers and bodies of water if that's where you're going to be staying around. Yes, you need the water, but just be very cognitive about it. Don't get yourself into a spot where it could potentially cause you problems.
Exactly. 100%. Be aware of it. Take a look at it. I mean, a lot of rivers that I grew up near, you could actually see where in the spring they had, branches where they would go, riverbeds that are dry 90% of the year, but in the spring at the high point, you can see where it would branch out and go around different ways. And you want to look for that evidence. Where they do the Nova Scotia Bushcraft gathering there at Smiley's. If you go down by that river and look at all the trees, because I've camped down there quite a bit, you can actually see that most of the trees at the 3 to 4 foot mark near the river have, debris all built up along them. Like it's a defined line. You can look through the whole forest and you can see it. And that's the flooding in that area. Like a lot of that campground, like the roads and stuff, I'm sure are underwater at certain points in the spring. And that's the high point of that river. It's not a big river. It's a very small river. Did you get down and look at it last time you were down there?
No, I didn't. I think the last time I was there last year with you, and I think I basically blew in, did the chin wagon, of course, to catch up with everybody. We did our little stint, and then I was out the gate again. So, but
it's a nice little river. It's not very big. For the most part, you'd be lucky enough to find enough water in the summer to cover you. There's a couple of nice swimming holes, one right there by the bridge near the play area, right first where you come in, and another one down in the middle of the campground. But a lot of the other spots, I've walked quite a bit of that little river there, and a lot of it's ankle deep. Like you can walk a lot of it now. And it just flows down, it fills up the holes like a lot of rivers do, and just keeps on going.
Yep. But it just goes to show, even small amounts of water can cause big problems very suddenly. And this is the worst time of year for that to happen because you have that snow mixed with the warm weather and potentially rain that just dumps so much water over an area in a short time. And I guess another point, you already mentioned it, is the ground. Regardless of how you cut this, the ground is always going to be wet. So that's something to be cognitive of too. In the winter, sometimes you can prepare for it a little more. It's almost like the frost sets in. You can kind of clear the snow away. You get a little bit of thermal layering down and you're okay. This time of year, it's always generally very damp, and you can kind of see a theme playing out here that wetness is the number one problem with spring. Surprise, surprise. But anyway, if you are going to ground sleep, now you almost need to get yourself raised up so the moisture can't collect in your sleeping area, as well as you got to give yourself a good like layering in between to keep what's left of the cold coming out, because water works as almost like a thermal paste. It will make that cold transfer that much more rapid to you. So it's bad enough to lay on something that's cold and dry, but now you're laying on something that's wet and cold, which is going to zap the heat out of you just twice as fast. Like, the dampness just never goes away in the spring. So you have to allow for that quite a bit, and that's why Ben and I would switch to hammocks. That tries to alleviate the whole ground leaching, and we try to recoup some of that with the underquilts and pads and stuff like Ben said. But if you did decide to ground sleep, just be aware, throwing a ground sheet down and your mat may not be enough for you this time. Like, you may have to look for a higher spot, make sure no water's going to pool in. You may have to dig drainage trenches, but you got to keep that water away from you, because it is the time of year where a cup of water could mean the difference between you potentially having a really uncomfortable, almost freezing to death night and having a good time.
Oh yeah, and you hit a really good point there with just the humidity. The spring is a lot more humid. This summer, me and the wife, or not this summer, this week, me and the wife went for a walk just around the airport where I work, and I think there was like 4 or 5 degrees. That's a fairly warm compared to most of this winter. Wearing the same jacket and pants and boots that we wore all year round, I think we were colder than we were most of the winter. Some of the days that were like -7, -8 didn't feel nearly as cold. It's a bitter, biting cold when it's that humid.
Yeah, it almost cuts into you. And I know everybody says, oh, that wind cut right into me, but it legitimately feels like it's cutting into you sometimes. It's so piercing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Just looking at some of the comments here.
Yeah.
Christopher builds a moat around tent, wakes up and steps into deep puddles.
But I mean, it's true. Any indentation, and this is another thing, there's still just enough snow around, it could potentially hide things under. But, like, the last 2 days, it's been +10 and raining, like today has been. I think the snow dropped 5 inches today alone, in over the course of, 7, 8 hours? So imagine going to sleep, because, I mean, it's dark now, 9 o'clock. You wake up, say, 8 o'clock. That's 12 hours. That's a long time where snow can change, especially if it's misting or raining.
Oh, yeah. And the other thing to really keep in mind, like you said, like, you don't know what's kind of underneath. So if you're walking across a field, snow or whatever, you don't know what's underneath it. It very well could be a puddle or a small pond that you didn't really know was there, or maybe it isn't always there. But that ice at this time of year, I always refer to it as rotten. You know what I mean? Rotten ice.
It's like that murky, cloudy ice. It's full of air. So it might be, 8 inches thick, but it's only going to give you the strength of like 2 inches of good ice.
It breaks up like needles too sometimes. You know what I mean? Like it's very porous all the way through. So it's when it cracks, you get these long, thin shards that are all like standing up. It's like someone packed a whole bunch of needles of ice together. It just doesn't have, like you said, near the strength. So you got to be really careful with that stuff. So when you're walking, be real careful where you're walking, what you're doing. It's probably a good time to have that walking stick and just poke areas if you're on shore. Exactly.
I was just talking to Gary there about his ice. He's looking at some ice fishing gear as he's listening to us, of course. And I was asking what he was fishing for. He was saying some perch and pickerels. So I was asking him if there's any bones to those things. I've never actually fished any of that myself, but I heard they can be a bony fish if you don't know how to prepare them. I've always wanted to try. It's just never really worked out. But yeah, the ice, it's just, from the fire department standpoint of view, this is the time of year when we get the majority of our ice rescue calls. For that reason. People look, you know what, there's a foot of ice, but realistically it's only giving you like 3, maybe 4 inches of good holding ice, and then the rest is just garbage. So they get out there walking around thinking they're going to cross the lake or the harbor or the river or whatever, good solid ice. And all next thing you know, you're down in there. You get wet, you come out, and now it's the fight, can you get warm? And how far in the woods are you when this happens? And that's something that you have to keep in mind too to get the most out of your trips. Like, prepare for what happens if you get wet. So, like, keep a good spare set of clothes in a dry bag. You may never need it, but it's a good idea. Even outside spring, it's still a good idea to keep a set of clothes in a dry bag. But during the spring, it's like literally life-saving important. Nice dry clothes with a means of starting a fire.
Yeah. Yeah, I almost always have a spare change of clothes in my bag, and I try to keep a spare change of clothes at my vehicle, just because sometimes by the time you get out, you may need that extra option. It takes a while for the vehicle to warm up and all that. And you mentioned, like, this is the time for the firefighters that deal with, like, ice rescue and stuff. And I remember, like, growing up, everyone with the snowmobiles, this was the time when people put their snowmobiles down into the holes and got them stuck. And, they're going across a field, look perfectly fine. Partway through, it's just slush. And when they kept going, they'd been fine, but they slowed down for whatever reason, and you just can't recover. And
it just won't grab again. And I'm thinking down Marigamish Harbor now. We've actually been lucky the last couple of years, but this is generally, if we're going to get a snowmobile through the ice call, it's now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Snowmobiles are great. Don't get me wrong, but they have their limitations. They're meant to be on snow. They're not really meant to go on much else. And in the spring, as the water opens up, we used to get a lot of guys to do the skipping. You know what I mean?
Mm. Where they come onto it really fast and try and ride the surface tension of the water.
Oh yeah, and it's quite amazing. There's a few guys I knew that were really good at it. Like, they could put those snowmobiles on the water and move them across just like a jet ski. They say it's really hard on the belts and stuff, right? But it's good as long as you're moving. Do not stop on the water, right?
Yeah, don't slow down and think, I don't need to be this fast. You definitely need to be that fast, and just keep going. But anyway, we digress a little bit.
I never owned anything fast enough to do that. My 74 Olympic could not do it.
No, I've never owned anything that would do that either, and that includes most of my bikes and stuff like that. And even if they would, I don't think I'd have the guts to do it. I'd be too worried if, blub, 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 blub. And then all I could think is, well, I just have to rebuild that engine now. That's providing I don't freeze to death. But
yeah. So.
Yeah. But, so dry clothing.
I guess that's our big message here, really, is if you're going out in the spring, take the warm clothes and make sure you keep it dry and have a spare set, because there's a really good chance you are going to get it wet, and there's not a lot you can do about it once it's wet to get it dry quick. Even getting a good fire going in the spring
is hard.
It is the trickiest time of year to get a fire going. It is most likely the wood is going to be wet, where the leaves and stuff haven't come out yet. You can't really tell what's a live tree and a dead tree sometimes, and not easily. And even the standing dead is oftentimes soaked. It's bad enough here in the winter in some things like birch. Standing dead birch is still fairly heavy most times.
Oh yeah, very much so.
But a lot of wood in the spring just soaks up all the moisture. It absorbs all that moisture, and it's hard to get it to light. I'm not saying you can't get a fire going in spring. I definitely can. I definitely will. But if push comes to shove, hard times, this is the time you're going to struggle the most. This is the time to get out and really test your skills, really, for that. I think, like I said, it's not my favorite time of year. It's probably my least favorite, but it is possibly one of the best challenging times. If you want to really hone your skill, now is the time to get out there and get used to, creating fires, setting up camps. If you can safely camp in the spring, the rest of the year is a little bit of a an easier time for you, I think.
Oh, for sure.
If
And on that note, I say it more as a word of caution than advice. I guess you can look at it as both. If you are planning to kind of go out this time of year, oh, it must be my wife's phone I hear. If you do plan to go out this time of year, maybe stick a little closer to home just in case something does happen. Along with those dry sets of clothes, some of those like hand warmers and stuff like that, where it is harder to get a fire going, uh, sneaking a couple of those along with you probably go a long way too. So if you did get wet, get out of the wet clothes, get the dry clothes on, get those heaters going, and get them into like where the blood vessels collect, and that'll stabilize your temperature. It may not make you sweat bullets, but it'll at least stabilize your temperature. Because there is, without getting too technical, there is a window there where you can apply warming devices like that, and it will help or stabilize you. And then at a certain point, and most times when you hit this point, you're too dopey to do anything about it. But then it actually starts causing problems, and that's when you got to get into a hospital and hypothermia and stuff like that. But what happens is, as you cool off, the blood vessels in your extremities constrict to keep the warm blood flowing to the vital organs, like your heart and liver, lungs, all that good stuff, brain, of course. And literally, you start accumulating fine ice crystals in your extremities. So if you try and like put something really warm on that, and this is being a warning to doing it to somebody else as well, if you warm them up,
well,
it will. Sorry.
you're kind of getting a little tinny there for a second.
Oh, sorry. Might be too far from my mic. But anyway, long story short, you have a window there where heating works effectively, and after that window passes, you can actually be doing more damage. So keep that in mind, and stay close. If there's water in the area you know you're going to and there's a risk there, stay in an area where you can get out of there and get warmed up properly, or use those heater packs to get you out of there and get warmed up properly. Try not to go plugging away too far back if you don't have an escape plan, if that makes any kind of sense. I don't want to go too much on the medical side of it because we're not about giving medical advice. We're just about trying to make you guys safe. That make kind of sense, Ben? Did I?
It makes sense. It's
I started going down the rabbit hole and I pulled myself back out. So.
it's fairly accurate there. I was just checking a couple of things here. I noticed Nova Scotia yak fisher Gary there's gave us a bit of advice on how to look up some stuff for pickerel. Get about 5 boneless fish fillets. And you mentioned you really haven't had caught much pickerel, or you tried to cook them?
No, never have. I have caught the odd perch, but most times it was catch and release because I always assumed they were too bony. But I do know some people that get them here, and same as pickerel, I've always just kind of avoided it. But Gary was saying that you can get 5 decent boneless fillets per fish, so I'm probably going to look that up, maybe give that a go this year. This year I want to try and do more fishing when I'm out. Last year I did very little, and when I did not do it successfully, as Ben can attest to. The pepperettes did not work so well for old Roberto, so he's got to up his fishing game a little bit here. But yeah, I think we've kind of hit the major concern of this whole show was the spring is challenging. Don't go out assuming it's not challenging. There's a lot of factors that make it more challenging than the rest of the year. And be very aware of that when you go out. We're not saying you can't go out and you can't have a good time, because of course you can. Just be cognitive of what you're getting into and have a good plan to be safe for that. So, like we said, don't sleep in hollows, get up off the ground, avoid water, or be very cognitive of water. Maybe not go as far into the woods. Make sure you keep good dry clothes. It's all based around these extra challenges you're going to face this time of year. Safe to say that, Ben? I think that's a brief recap. I did want to recap because we kind of went all over the place there for a minute.
No, I agree with what you're saying there. I mean, that's the gist of what we said. Gary's really tempting to fish there. Yeah, if you want to do more fishing this year, I'm getting distracted, but I'm going to bring it up.
I was just starting to read back there, Gary, too. But yeah, I do want to get some more fishing going this year.
We should see if me, you, and Gary can't meet up on Gasbro Lake and do some fishing. That's where I got some nice pickerel last year with Gary. I'll invite you there, and then Gary can either say yay or nay.
or just not show up when we do. You know, I get that sometimes. But yeah, I'd be down for a good trip to get out, do some fishing, have a camp, chat with Gary. I have yet to actually get out with Gary, so I hope you're still listening, Gary, and didn't abandon us there. But if you're interested, maybe we can work something out. Make a weekend off it or something, or at least a night.
Oh yeah. I mean that's a beautiful little lake there, and I say little, it's not that small. And the fishing there was great. We were catching pickerel left, right, and center. There's a few other types of fish there, I think, but for the most part, we were getting pickerel. Christopher, they got 3 feet of snow. He still likes to camp and showing no signs of going anywhere time soon.
Yeah, he probably missed the start where we said that we've basically been plus 10 and raining for 2 days. So our snow took a heavy hit. We're nowhere near 3 feet, but at one point we had 3 feet of snow here.
Yeah, for a night.
Down here it was more than a night. I think I had 3 feet of snow between out here for probably a couple weeks. We got way more snow than you guys did. Like, it seemed to stop on Mount Tom, as it does, of course, and everything south of Truro was like half the amount of snow we got.
Oh yeah. Yeah, down here I didn't really get much. Honestly, I can say this because I was like bragging, especially to guys over in Newfoundland, right? Like,
well, Newfoundland's its own thing, man. They have 3 feet of snow in the summer.
My driveway anymore. I just wait in a couple of days. It usually just melts away for me. It's awesome.
That's like
my friends and family in Newfoundland, and they're like, "Yeah, we got 4 foot of snow yesterday."
Yeah, like Newfoundland is its own thing. Beautiful place. But it gets snow like nowhere else. Like maybe Nunavut. Like Newfoundland is just crazy the amount of snow it gets. And as soon as you get off the boat, Wreck House, always snowing.
Oh, that's crazy, Wreck House.
It can be June 27th and you're going to have wind and cold temperatures. But anyway, we got off topic again. What are we saying, Gaspro?
Gary gave us a list of the fish we can get. Gaspro has bass, pickerel, both perch species, alewife, catfish, and a few trout. Fish I don't even know about, but I tell you, it was some fun. And those pickerel, when they grab, are a hoot to catch.
I hear they fight like a bugger. Like, it's almost like bass fishing.
Yeah, but you want like a serious lead, either like a steel lead or Gary keeps telling me, like, get some 20 or 30 pound test and put like a foot, 16 inches or something on it, so that when they grab, they won't chew through that right away.
Yeah, because they got fairly sharp teeth, don't they?
Yeah, and they're just chomping away.
Anyway, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I think we pretty much summed up most of what we want for this episode, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get out. Are you hoping to get some spring camping in, or?
March is tricky for me. I want to say yes. I got training this weekend. I'm going to be doing some ice rescue training. I may take some pictures to show some of the points we just made today. I'm going to take my waterproof camera that's supposed to be good for minus 32 Celsius. We're going to see how this works out. And I'm actually going to try and take some pictures of the ice as we're making holes to kind of tack on from this episode. So anybody that's listening, definitely check our Facebook page come Saturday afternoon. And hopefully I'll have some of those up, and you'll kind of see what we're talking about with the ice, because we were out looking at it, and it's doing exactly what we were talking about. It's spidering, it's fingering, it's just junk. But we'll hopefully get that out. Then the weekend after that, I think it's Melissa and I's anniversary / birthday getaway weekend. And then the weekend after that, I might be able to get out for a night. So yes, I am hoping to get out, but I'm hoping there's still a little bit of snow in the woods so I can test some of my skills as we were talking about there. I noticed the cattails are about the right time now. They're browning up nicely where some of those can be plucked. And I'll start drying them off for hand drills. They'll have to be dried for about a month, but they're dense this time of year. So once they dry, they get really hard and really tight in the fibers and make real nice hand spindles. They'll work other times of the year, but I find right now it's like they're just really dense, and once they dry out, they're basically rock hard, and they're just perfect. But anyway, maybe that'll be another show, and we'll talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
But so I think I've said all I want to say on this episode. We are coming up on 40 minutes. We're actually in our ballpark number, so I guess we're going to call this Season 2. Because second year, season 2, does that make sense? We don't have to go calendar years. That means nothing to bushcrafters.
Yeah, it's definitely year 2.
So, yeah. Let's call it first episode of season 2. Even though I labeled it as episode 53, I may go back and I may change that. Season 2, episode 1.
Yeah.
Because why not? I feel good about it. Makes me feel pretty inside. But, yeah. Anyway, yeah, I know. I'm giddy tonight.
I guess we should say congratulations on our winner once again. So was it Pierre?
Pierre, I just want to remember his last name there. Give me one sec. And I should know this. We've been talking about it nonstop for about 3 days now. Getting his prizes or his giveaways out to him and trying to figure out what we could send over and what we couldn't send over. And we think we're okay. There's still one iffy item in there, so we'll see how it all goes. Where are we at?
So I have everything packaged up, and I'm going to get down to the post office either tomorrow or the next day, and it'll be on the way. And I don't know how long it's going to take him to get it, but I hope he gets it relatively soon after we send it. And we're excited for him to get it, and hopefully we'll hear from him.
So the last name's Jensen. And if you are listening, once you get the package, let us know. Maybe shoot us a message and just tell us what you think. This is new to us too. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we didn't have like, oh, here's a care package, we'll send this out. This was stuff we had that we acquired, purchased, whatever the case may be. I don't know how to say this. You got a couple of basically bushcrafting rednecks that were like, yeah, we think that's neat. And we threw a bunch of stuff together and sent it out. So, did we hit the mark? Do you like the stuff? Would you make recommendations? Not recommendations? We did have a little discussion there at one point about some other things. I think maybe last episode. So, about doing like almost round robin draws. So, we'll see where that all goes. But anyway, let us know what you think about the items you got and how you felt about it, because we're curious too. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
I'm having a real problem getting my thoughts out of my mouth for some reason tonight. Not just tonight. That's the sad part.
Very good. Okay, like I said, we've pretty close to got our 45 minutes or so in there now, and we'll let everyone go. We don't want to keep you forever. But we do want to hear from you next week. We want you to get out and enjoy yourself in a safe manner. Try some new things. And like I said, get back to us. Tell us how things are going. We'd love to hear from you. And have a great week.
Night, everybody.